So I just watched a video by David Gagnon of Theory and Philosophy, who's very smart and cute, by the way, and you should subscribe to his channel, link in the description, where he interviews Martin Bunzl on his book Thinking While Walking. They go over a number of different philosophical topics, mostly to do with ecology, but in particular there's one argument that I think has some very problematic entailments, and I'd like to go over it. You can watch the video yourself to make sure that I'm being honest, but basically what he says is that it's not really possible to solve our current climate crisis by moving over to renewable energy, because doing so will take about 75 years according to him. The example he gives is that it took about 75 years to move from wood power to coal power, so dogmatically I guess we should also expect that it will take 75 years to move over from coal power to renewable energy. Now, if he were able to snap his fingers like Thanos, I guess, what he would actually do to solve climate change is to reduce the population by half. He's very strong about this population argument. In fact, he labels this paradox that he believes exists, where people reduce their population, they reduce their birth rates, they don't, have as many children when they're more affluent. So in order to prevent climate change, we need to make everybody more affluent so that the population goes down. But in order to make everybody more affluent, we also need to increase our productivity, which increases climate change. On top of this evaluation, he's extremely pessimistic about the future. He believes that 80% of people are going to die during climate change. Mostly poor minorities. He explicitly says, okay, the white, rich northerners are going to mostly survive, and they'll be the ones who repopulate the planet. Now, putting his arguments in this particular order make him already sound a bit like an eco-fascist, which I'll explain later, but I really don't think he is. He seems to me more like a liberal, universal reason, enlightenment, analytic philosopher sort of guy. I mean, one of the main concepts that he comes up with in his book is sinking, which is strolling while thinking, and he concludes the talk talking about how he needs to abandon a little bit his analytic Western individualistic way of thinking and take on a more Eastern, socially constructed way of thinking, and really, we need to inculcate future generations with a sense of awe for nature, and I don't think this guy voted for Trump. More importantly, part of his argument is that degrowth isn't going to work because people in the so-called third world are going to want to have more growth because they don't like living shitty lives, and that we don't really have a right in the so-called first world to deny them the chance to industrialize, and at the same time we don't have enough to distribute so that everybody can reach the same standard of living that we appreciate in the so-called first world. That being said, if you take his ideas about climate change seriously, which I'm not sure he does entirely, I think they have the potential to lead you down a very dangerous path, namely ecofascism. Ecofascism is pretty easy to understand. You just have to break it up into its two components, which is ecology and fascism. Fascism is, of course, the 20th century ideology developed by Benito Mussolini. Basically, it believes that life is built by struggle between different nation states, and that the nation state is the authentic soul of the entire people. A modern example of fascism is white nationalism, which is the idea that the nation state should be composed entirely of white people, and these white people are constantly in conflict with black people, Jewish people, etc. And if you talk to somebody who's, being, I guess, a sort of nice white nationalism, then it's okay, of course, for other races to have their own nation states. So the nation state of Israel is fine because that's the Jewish state. African states, besides, of course, Zimbabwe and South Africa and the rest of them, are also okay because those are black nation states. Black nationalism is, of course, also fine, but implicitly, these nations are also in struggle with the white nation state, and they're trying to fight over dominance. Ecology is, of course, concern for the environment, but in this case it's often heightened. For example, if you look at Nazi ideology, they talk about blend soil, which is the idea that the German people ethnically have this connection to the environment and they need to keep this pristine environment because that represents their ethnic purity and so on. Of course, it doesn't have to be ethnic for it to be fascist or ecological, but generally there's a certain degree of prioritizing the environment over certain groups of people. Now, I'm sure you can already see why Bunzl's arguments appeal to this way of thinking. If the only immediate way to reduce global warming is by reducing the population, and it's most likely we're going to end up losing 80% of the population anyway, why not take the initiative and dominate and exterminate everyone else so that my preferred group gets to survive? Specifically, if I'm a white nationalist and I accept the idea that the 20% of people who do survive are going to mostly be white, and those are the people who are going to repopulate the planet, isn't that my dream come true? It's a little bit disturbing to me that Bunzl is so cavalier about this. It makes me think of the video that J-Reg put out a while back where he impersonates an identitarian, and he talks about how he does acknowledge global warming, but he thinks that this is going to lead to more migration crises, which means that we need to do more to control our borders because all these people are going to want to come in, they're going to want to take our resources, they're going to want to compete with us, and if we want to preserve our own nation, then we're going to have to keep them out. Now, obviously, I don't think that Bunzl believes these things, and I don't necessarily fault him for putting these ideas out there. After all, if it's true, then it's true, and we're going to have to face it one way or another. What I do fault him for is being a philosopher who doesn't think through the ramifications of his ideas and doesn't give us a satisfying way out. If he takes his own ideas seriously, and he doesn't want us to take the ecofascism route, then he should think through his ideas and propose solutions that give necessary weight to the fact that he thinks 80% of the population is likely to die. I think what it really boils down to is that he enjoys his lifestyle of traveling around the country and sinking, and he'd rather not challenge it too much, even though he thinks a lot of people are going to die, but not him, I guess.